Imagine you're a hunter 20,000 years ago. You just killed a massive animal. More meat than your entire group can eat in a single sitting. No fridge, no salt, no way to run to a store for supplies. And if you don't figure something out fast, every single calorie you just risked your life for is going to rot on the ground. So what do? This video is about exactly that. How ancient humans kept meat from spoiling before salt, before refrigerators, before any of the preservation technology we take for granted today. Most people assume early humans just ate whatever they could immediately and wasted the rest. But that's wrong. And the real answer is far more clever, far more strange, and honestly far more impressive than anything you'd expect. We're going to walk through 10 different strategies ancient people used. And by the end, one of them is going to completely flip the way you think about prehistoric survival. Let's start with something that sounds almost too simple. The landscape itself was the refrigerator. During the Ice Age, large parts of the world stayed frozen for months at a time. We're talking about permanently frozen ground, deep snowbanks, shaded ravines where temperatures never climbed above freezing. Ancient hunters didn't need to invent cold storage. Cold storage already existed. They just had to use it. Archaeologists have found evidence of exactly this. Carcasses and bones preserved in frozen ground, essentially ancient meat lockers carved by nature itself. A hunter-gatherer in Siberia or Northern Europe could drag a kill into the right kind of terrain and come back weeks later to find it still intact. Think about that. No tools, no containers, just knowing where to leave something. But cold ground wasn't always available, so what happened in regions that weren't permanently frozen? Some researchers believe ancient people used cold rivers. Submerging meat in icy, fast-moving streams could slow bacterial growth significantly. The water stays cold year-round in certain environments, especially near glacial runoff or underground springs. It's not perfect. There are contamination risks. It only works under specific conditions. But it works. And ancient humans were paying close attention to their environment in ways most of us never have to. They noticed which streams stayed cold. They noticed which spots stayed shaded. They were reading the landscape constantly. That's important, but cold water and frozen ground only get you so far. What about preservation that required no specific terrain at all? This is where wind comes in. People assume smoking was the ancient go-to method for drying meat. But here's the thing. In cold, dry environments, you don't need smoke at all. You just need wind. Thin strips of meat hung in the open air, exposed to dry, cold wind, will dehydrate naturally. The moisture leaves the meat before bacteria can do serious damage. This is essentially the same process behind modern air-dried meats, and it requires zero technology. No fire, no salt, no tools. Just the right climate and the knowledge to slice meat thin enough for the air to do its job. Simple, effective, and almost invisible in the archaeological record, which is probably why we underestimate it. But here's where ancient preservation gets genuinely creative. Fat, rendered animal fat, forms a physical barrier against oxygen, and bacteria need oxygen to thrive. Long before anyone understood microbiology, ancient people figured out that coating cooked meat in fat extended how long it stayed edible. You can see echoes of this in traditional foods that survived into the modern era. Duck confit, pemmican, potted meats sealed under lard. These aren't accidents of cuisine. They're living fossils of a preservation strategy that may be tens of thousands of years old. In colder climates especially, fat-preserved meat could last for weeks, maybe longer. And if fat was the coating, what was the container? The animal itself. Instead of using separate bags or baskets, ancient people could wrap meat inside cleaned animal hides, stomachs, or intestines. The skin protected the contents from insects, dust, and direct sunlight. It made transport easier. It kept things together. The animal provided the food and the packaging in one. There's something almost elegant about that. Nothing wasted, everything used. That's important, but there's one preservation method that most people find genuinely surprising when they hear it. Fermentation. We tend to think of fermented meat as a modern or niche cultural thing. But some Arctic and subarctic cultures have been intentionally aging meat under controlled conditions for thousands of years, producing foods that smell absolutely horrific to outsiders, but remain edible and nutritious. The cold slows dangerous microbial growth while allowing specific fermentation processes to continue. The result sounds like spoiled meat. It's not. And early humans living in cold environments may have independently discovered this process simply by observing what happened to meat they left in certain conditions. The meat that smelled a particular way didn't make them sick. The meat that smelled another way did. Over generations, that pattern became knowledge. Your taste for cheese, yogurt, sourdough, fermented anything didn't develop in a modern kitchen. It has roots far older than that. Now here's one that might be the most underrated strategy of all. Bone. When ancient hunters killed large animals, they didn't always strip every scrap of meat immediately. Long bones, the thick femurs, and tibias of large mammals are essentially sealed containers. The dense outer bone protects the marrow inside from rapid spoilage. Ancient people could carry these bones, transport them across distances, and crack them open later when they needed the calories. The bone itself was doing preservation work the entire time. Built-in packaging, built-in protection, and one of the most calorie-dense foods available once you got inside. And if you're enjoying this, drop a comment below telling me which of these methods surprised you most. The algorithm genuinely loves hearing from you, and I read these. Also, if you want to go deeper on how ancient humans actually lived day to day, there's a video right here that will completely change how you see your own ancestors. Subscribe if you haven't yet. This channel goes places most history content never touches. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Everything we've talked about so far assumes ancient humans were trying to store meat away from the kill site, back at camp, close to the group. But some researchers think that's the wrong mental model entirely. Ancient people may have hidden food away from camp on purpose. Rather than dragging everything back to a central location, hunters could cache meat across multiple sites away from their living area. Yes, scavengers might find some of it, but spreading food across several hidden locations meant you never lost everything at once. One cache gets raided, you still have 3 others. It's a risk management strategy. Diversify your food storage the same way you diversify anything valuable. And it kept dangerous scavengers from being drawn directly to where people were sleeping. Smart, counterintuitive, and almost impossible to prove archaeologically, which is exactly why it's been overlooked. But there's one more strategy that doesn't involve any of these techniques. Keep the animal alive. Some traditional hunting groups didn't kill prey immediately after capture. They kept animals alive until they were actually needed. A living animal doesn't spoil. It feeds itself. It stays fresh indefinitely. You only take the calories when you're ready to use them. It sounds obvious once you hear it, but it completely reframes how we think about ancient hunters. They weren't just killers. They were managers. They were thinking ahead. And timing mattered more than almost anything else. The biggest hunts happened during the coldest seasons or during animal migrations, when natural conditions already slowed spoilage and when massive amounts of meat became available all at once. Ancient humans weren't fighting against their environment to preserve food. They were synchronizing with it. They hunted when nature made storage easiest. They moved when the landscape gave them advantages. They read seasonal patterns the way we read clocks. Here's the twist that ties all of this together. Ancient humans may not have needed to preserve as much meat as we assume. When a large animal was killed, that food wasn't just for one family. It was shared across the entire group, sometimes shared with neighboring groups, sometimes deliberately left for scavengers as a kind of social currency. In many traditional societies, the person who hoards food after a big kill loses status. The person who gives it away gains it. Generosity wasn't just kindness, it was strategy. Because the person who shares today can call in favors tomorrow. Social cooperation may have been the single most effective preservation technology ancient humans ever developed. Not fat, not fermentation, not frozen ground. People. You share the mammoth today. Someone else shares the deer next week. Nothing spoils, no one starves. The whole group survives. So let's bring this all together. Ancient humans froze meat using the landscape itself. They slowed spoilage in cold rivers. They air-dried strips of meat on dry wind alone. They sealed marrow inside bones like natural containers. They coated food in fat to block oxygen. They wrapped meat in hides for transport and protection. They fermented food in cold conditions, discovering what we still eat today. They cached supplies across multiple locations to reduce risk. They kept animals alive until the calories were needed. And they timed their hunts with the seasons to work with nature instead of against it. Every single one of these methods required no salt, no refrigerator, No technology beyond what the natural world already provided and what a sharp, observant human mind could figure out. The real lesson here isn't that ancient humans were primitive and barely surviving. The lesson is the opposite. They were reading a world most of us have completely forgotten how to see. They knew their environment the way you know your own house. Every cold stream, every shaded ravine, every seasonal migration, every predictable freeze. That knowledge was the technology. And the most powerful tool they had wasn't a stone blade or a fire or a hide container. It was each other.